Tony, we often read about you in the press as representing victims of police misconduct. Why is this particular issue so important to you?
Well, when you think about, fundamentally, I mean, our country is based upon, the Constitution. That's what started this country, the United States of America. And if I ever were to be a Supreme Court justice, which I do not aspire to be, but if I was one, they would say that Justice Romanucci would be a constitutionalist. That's how I feel about the Constitution. So when I see, a deprivation of, the simplest right that everybody is familiar with, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, when you look at that, if we don't have those constitutional rights, well then really we don't live in the United States of America. We could live in another country, but it's not the USA if we don't have the Constitution behind us. So that's why I'm passionate about it. I'm an attorney, and attorneys are designed by their education and training to defend the Constitution, and I will defend it. So when there is a deprivation of constitutional rights on a citizen by a police department or a police officer, I take that very seriously. We are not a military state. We're not a militarized police department, although some people would beg to differ on that. So when there is someone whose rights are violated because excessive force has been had upon them, or they are denied due process, or it's one of the other, they're denied a fair jury trial, that's where we come in. And to me, that work is very, very important, and I like it. It's my background in criminal work that transitioned over into personal injury. I get to take that and I get to practice that in the civil arena.
Tony, what cases have you represented related to police misconduct that have stuck out as game changers in terms of policy or even cultural mindset? And why is that?
Well, we've represented many, many victims in the area of police misconduct and brutality, but certainly there are several that stand out significantly in terms of creating change, not only in the victim or the family's life, but also in terms of policy. And Freddie Wilson is one of those cases. That's a case where he was a 34-year-old man. He was a budding rap star on the west side of Chicago, and he was with his friends one night, recording music in a home studio, and he decided to make a run to the corner convenience store. It was late at night, and on his way back, the Chicago Police Department pulled him over because the car he was driving had a non-working headlight. And Freddie pulled over to the side of the road just like any citizen would do. He didn't run or evade them, but within about 90 seconds of him being pulled over, he had 18 bullet wounds in his body, and he died. He was killed on the spot, and there were no witnesses. So it's been said that the best witness is a dead witness, and Freddie died from his gunshot wounds within seconds of him being struck 18 times. They actually shot at him 24 times. They missed 6 times. So in that case, we litigated against the city of Chicago and its police department, and from the beginning we were told that we would never win this case because the allegation was that Freddie pulled a gun on the police officers when he was pulled over for his violation for not having a working headlight. And because there were no witnesses, we had to reverse engineer this case. We had to piece it together bit by bit, second by second, little piece of evidence by evidence. And we were able to determine that Freddie had never had a gun that night. The gun that was found on the scene was not his, but it belonged to one of the Chicago police officers who were on the scene. It was not Freddie's gun. So ultimately, we did win the case. The city of Chicago was wrong. We never lost our aim. We never flinched when they told us that we couldn't win. And again, it was that moment when we had all of Freddie's family in the office and we told them that we had won the case, that the city was going to settle with them. It's that moment that carries you on to the next case, and you know that you have to continue to do these deeds over and over again to help people. In the city of Chicago, when it did settle the case in its own press release, it acknowledged that its own officers were less than candid with them, and that's why they had to resolve and move forward and move on with this case.
How do you think we can educate our community, especially aspiring police officers and law enforcement members, on how to tackle this issue? How do we get politicians to protect its citizens if we can't rely on law enforcement to do that?
There isn't one hard answer on how to solve this problem, but I feel very strongly that there is one way to begin this. And I think both the police departments, not only locally, but, statewide and nationally, have to really ingrain themselves and embed themselves within the community. Right now, there is such a great deal of mistrust amongst the citizens, and especially amongst the diverse citizens of this country and the police departments, that neither one trusts the other. Well, how do you begin trust? And that's by beginning to get to know each other better. And I think if the police, on a beat by beat, squad car by squad car, and if they get to know who it is that they're representing on the streets, who they're protecting, I think if you can develop this trust over time, you can also develop respect. And once you develop trust and respect, I think you'll see a lot less, because you won't eliminate the problem. I think we have to be realistic. I think you'll see a lot less of this brutality that exists amongst the police department against citizens, and citizens committing acts against the police, because it is a two-way street. And then more specifically, I think cameras, personal cams on police officers will certainly be one way, because it's going to verify a lot of citizen complaints, and it will also nullify a lot of citizen complaints. So I think it's a very good thing. I think the police should embrace personal cams because it will also help them in many, many different ways. I think you can find that probably 80% of citizen complaints against police officers will be able to be determined, just by what's on the video.
Can you tell us about a situation as a personal injury attorney where you might have felt really challenged, either in the courtroom or among colleagues working on a case?
Yes, I have felt very challenged working on cases before, because when I take a case on, when I feel it, I see it, and when I can't convince my colleagues on the other side who are defending the case against me to see it the way that I see it, I get very frustrated. That, to me, is the biggest challenge. And for the most part, ultimately, I can say we have a very good success ratio, so the way that I see the case is the way ultimately it ends up. But I like to see people believe in what I believe in, and when I don't see that, I get very frustrated, I get very challenged. It's very similar to what's going on in our society today as a whole with police brutality. I feel very frustrated that police don't see what they are doing to our citizens. I feel very frustrated that our politicians or our legislature doesn't create the laws to stop this brutality on our citizenship. And that's why I feel almost so responsible to keep moving forward on these issues, to make our stake claim by claim, client by client, case by case, to ensure that we do make these changes, and that ultimately, combined, all of our voices are heard. So whatever frustrations we have, that they don't see it the way that we see it, that the laws change, the culture changes, the mindset changes, and the policy changes.